We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These words from the Declaration of Independence are familiar to many of us, and yet it took 143 years for women to get the right to vote, and 189 years for Black people to get the right to vote. And still today, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are still only words for many people. Here in Boston, life expectancy varies by 30 years, depending on where you live. In Roxbury, with many poor and Black people, life expectancy is 59 years. In the Back Bay, wealthy and mostly white, life expectancy is 91 years. It's tough to have liberty when you are in prison. The United States incarcerates 716 people for every 100,000 people. Our rate of incarceration is more than 5 times higher than most countries in the world. Millions of people in our country don't have health care, a decent job, good education, a home they can afford, and that makes it pretty hard to pursue happiness. So on this show, you are going to meet people who are making it possible to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. People today who are making the words of the Declaration of Independence come true.
And so what advice would you have for young people who are interested either in social justice and specifically in working in a union? You know, I understand things have changed since the 1970s at City Hospital when you started out there. But I was wondering, from your viewpoint and having been a leader in the union so long, what you think would be helpful for people to know?
I would say two things. It would be good, even if you're a college-educated, young, liberal, whatever, left-wing, whatever, get a job in the industry you're working in. Get a job there so you know what the work is. If you don't know what the work is, then you're using your mind, but not necessarily your heart about what needs to change. Second thing I'd say is, I notice women have a really hard time, not a hard time in the work, but they have a hard time understanding that unions are about power, and being elected is about power, and women have a really hard time grasping that, feeling like they have it. Guys, it's easy for guys. They just think they inherited it. But I found an analogy for my father. He gave me about lasers, you know. A laser is really just one light bulb or a strong light bulb that's shown through. It takes all the waves that are going everywhere. So think about all your members. They're all over the place. They're going up and down, left, right. And it shines all those lights through a ruby, which makes everyone go up and down in the same direction and the same wavelength, and that can burn a hole through that wall. That light bulb through a ruby can burn a hole through a wall. And that's what I think, women in particular, but any labor leader, you are not the power. You are the laser that can focus the power to get stuff done. But if you think you're it, you're in trouble already. But if you think your role is to focus it and aim it in a direction that will make a change in the world, then you can hold on to it for much longer.
They are selected to represent their communities in terms of race and ethnicity, in terms of neighborhood, which is very important when you're trying to build community, and in terms of social and emotional development. That is, we hire young people who are doing very well, and we're hiring young people who have had very difficult experiences and maybe are still involved in some of those difficult experiences, but are motivated to do something good in the world.
And what's the theory around that? You said you hired some people who are doing well. I assume you mean doing well in school, traditional, and other folks that may be not doing so well in the traditional way of how adults in schools and institutions see them. What's the thinking or theory behind that? That's really interesting to me.
Just to be specific, it's young people who are connected to other young people in the community who maybe aren't involved in gangs, and involved in drugs, involved in dysfunctional kinds of behavior. The theory is, if you want to reach those young people on the street, you better have those young people involved in the core leadership. Really,
Oh,
that's
really
one
smart,
of that's
right.
one piece of the theory. And as an organizer, I'm sure you're
Yeah.
you know, familiar with that. And the other is that that these young people have something to offer, that they understand some of the realities there, and they have skills, and some of them have very strong, you know, organizing skills. They may be organizing in the wrong direction, but they are organizers, and they may be leading in the wrong direction, but they are leaders as well. So they can be very, very bright. Some, you know, just in very traditional ways, really, but disconnected from school, disconnected from family, or whatever. Or have other kinds of skills that are really fundamentally important. You know, so that's the theory behind reaching out to young people who have had more difficulty. And then the other piece of it is integration, right? So the way programs generally work is they work with high-risk youth, or they work with youth who are going to college, or you know, they work with kids who are going into trades or whatever, but they tend to be separated, and that means that they get reinforced by their peer group.
Oh,
So that's particularly negative phenomena when you look at young people who are grouped by their dysfunction. So we have DYS, Department of Youth Services. You go into a DYS facility with other young people who are having difficulty. The staff's trying to teach you a different way of being, but you're learning a lot from your peers.
Teenagers,
and so it's sort
like
of
most
recognizing
of us,
that peer culture and the power of that peer culture.
You know, I've been involved in academia a lot more over the last recent years, and too often I hear stories of, you know, researchers who want to do projects, and a lot of times they'll approach me and hope that I will sort of, you know, make introductions for them in a community, and I always have to say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And then they get upset and frustrated because in their eyes, they're like, well, we're trying to do something good for you. And I'm like, that's a very progressive approach to stance to take on it. But at the end of the day, you're getting resources to come in and study us and treat us like we're guinea pigs.
For no money.
And for no money, but you're asking the community to step out and teach you constantly. But we're not getting any return from that. You know, our communities are not being uplifted. We're not, you know, getting out of poverty. We're not getting new access into even the universities or the academic institutions that you represent. So if there's not even a quid pro quo of sorts, you know, so there's no equal benefit. It's basically this is another form of them harvesting, you know, information or harvesting resources from a community that's already resource strapped. And so I think there needs to be like a big, deeper conversation about that. And my hope is going into the future that we really shift the way communities of color, people of color are engaged at that level. And I completely agree with you. It needs to start off genuine. It needs to be more of a, hi, my name is so-and-so. Let's get to know each other. Let's build you know, a rapport as opposed to, you know, I'm coming in to, you know, extract information and because that's not a genuine place to start from, you know. And one thing I really appreciate about our relationship is, you know, you're an older white Jewish man. I'm a younger of sorts.
You're a lot younger. You're younger than my daughter by 10 years.
Yes. You know, I'm a younger, you know, black woman. You know, Haitian immigrant background, you know, raised Catholic, and yet you and I can still connect with each other on an interpersonal level. We can still be great friends despite our differences, because at the end of the day, we find synergy in our shared humanity and our shared values, and that's what it's about.
Said a lot of people that you organize are social workers, mental health workers who get into the work because they want to be helpful to people. And I noticed you've told me the union itself has done a lot of bargaining, not so much just for the improvements for the workers themselves, increased pay, better vacation, stuff that the individual workers like, but what you call common good, I think.
Yes.
You know, so if maybe you can talk about that, because I think that's something a lot of people don't know about. You mentioned, I think earlier, you've worked with foster care workers and tried to get the state to improve not so much life of the workers, but for the people in general. Can you describe that? Because that's, I think, really interesting.
Yeah. So I think it's a continuation of like the whole history of organizing, is that people, like people who have some strength and power, if they don't sort of share that and bring more and help other people organize and get power, then you're isolated. And just to go backwards a little bit, in the 50s and 60s, auto workers and steel workers used their clout to get state workers collective bargaining in other states.
Really? Huh.
And then, in sort of continuing that thread, we realized that state workers could do a better job serving their clients if we use some of our strength and power to improve services for people we work with. So, in bargaining, we've often pushed for example, for DCF social workers.
DCF is?
Department of Children and Families.
Right.
They help abused and neglected kids in Massachusetts and help their families.
Must be a tough job.
It is. It's very tough. And so we've gone to bargaining and to try to raise the rates for foster families, because there's a big problem in the child welfare world where foster families get very little resources, even though they're taking on kids to help
Resources
them.
like money to
Yeah,
pay
yeah.
for kids.
Pay-
You and I
pay-
are both parents.
Yeah.
Children end up costing a few
Yeah.
pennies. I mean, there are many lasting
They
values.
need to eat,
but
they need clothes.
I know, right.
So on.
Whatever, right. Cell phones. you
Yeah.
know,
So we've tried to use the political strength of the union to try to raise rates for foster families, because we know that will
Really?
benefit the families that we work with.
Right, makes the kids happier. Pursue happiness. It's hard when you don't have money to, buy decent food for the kids.
Exactly.
Take them out for pizza once a while.